Hello, I'm Phil Hosken, and I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a friendly Cornish giant. He was a conglomerate. It's not surprising if you don't know what a conglomerate is. There had only been one Cornish conglomerate, and there will never be another one. People call the friendly conglomerate H.T.P. That, of course, was not his real name, but it was much easier to say. His real name was Hosken, Trevithick, Polkinghorne and Company Limited. How did he get a name like that? Who were his parents? We'll start with the Hoskens. They had been millers in West Cornwall from the beginning of time. They were even millers when they went to America. The important Hosken in this story was William. He took over Luggins Mill in Hale from his father and rebuilt it after a fire in 1852. He equipped it with the best machinery and was reported as milling some of the finest flour in the whole country. William married Catherine Pick. She was from the Hale Hotel just across the road. He took over the hotel, moved in his family, and called it Penmare. William and Catherine had 2 children, a sensible daughter called Catherine, described as the apple of her father's eye, and a son called Sam. Catherine married John Rose Warne, a well-to-do farmer at Nampuska in Gwynedd. Her brother Sam was a farmer who had no interest in his father's flour mill. Sam bred one of the world's finest herds of shorthorn cattle. William worried about what would happen to the mill after his death, and he promised Catherine that her first surviving son would be a partner in the company. Of Sam's 4 children, Henry was the conscientious one who worked for the company all his life. His brother, William, was a farmer who did little farming. He chased a number of ideas that didn't bring him any financial rewards. One was the Carwyn Dairy Shop in Hale. There he sold milks, creams and junkets, and he introduced the people of Hale to strawberry ice cream and frothy coffee. He also sent oven-ready chicken to London by overnight train. There were several Trevithicks involved in H.T.P. They were all the grandsons of the much-respected Richard Trevithick, the inventor of the steam engine. A couple of words to those of you who believe James Watt invented the steam engine. Those 2 words are, he didn't. Watt didn't use the power of steam in his engines. He used atmospheric pressure. It was Trevithick's high-pressure steam engines that drove the world's industrial and transport revolutions. Sam Polkinghorne. He was a sensible businessman from Truro who would become its mayor. He had grown up in the milling and wool trades. Sam bought wool from farmers, processed it in Truro, and sold it through his agent in Bradford. On his travels, Sam called on the Hoskens of Hale. There he found the finest mill west of Bristol, and Sam Hosken with no interest in it. This was a situation that called for some of Sam's skill and ingenuity. In those days, companies passed on through generations of the same family. Sam had a plan. At the age of 43, Sam Polkinghorne married Catherine Rose Warren's 20-year-old daughter Jane and took her back to Princess House in Truro. Sam now had his feet firmly placed under the Hosken table. 6 years later, Jane's brother William, who by now was the manager of Luggan's Mill, sat with two Trevithick brothers on a bench overlooking Hale Towns. They planned an amalgamation of their milling interests. His grandfather, who thought Trevithick flour was rubbish, knew nothing of this shady trading. This was unlikely to be the only thing ever conceived on that bench. But 9 months later, the company of H.T.P was born. Based only on the reputations of the families concerned, and without any evidence of them ever having made any profit, the excited shareholders subscribed a great deal of cash. Between them, the Cornish shareholders, because Cornish they all were, subscribed, in today's money, £17.5 million to an unknown company in Hale. Fortunately, the new company made a profit its first year. That was a bubble of optimism on which it would float for years to come. Its first major purchase was Valetort Flour Mill in Devonport. It burned down a couple of years later and was completely rebuilt. This was followed by the building of the bakery and the biscuit factory at Hale. They never achieved their expected profits and were frequently criticised by Richard Trevithick. The Trevithicks brought the former Harvey steamships with them. H.T.P continued their weekly services to Liverpool, Cardiff and Bristol. These stopped during the Great War, but the noble M.J. Headley sailed on, bumping into ships and being shot at by German submarines. Sam Polkinghorne was not a team player. He continued to operate a number of his own companies whilst the director of H.T.P. As well as the Kennel Vale paper mills, he built a fine garage in Truro. This was many years before his fellow directors formed H.T.P Motors. Sam's dream was to operate a big wool treatment plant. He persuaded the other directors to create Devon Woolcombers in Tavistock. He managed this part of the company as if it were his own. It didn't make any real profit until in the years after his death. In 1915, the company moved its headquarters to Princess House in Truro. Sam and Janie moved out to live in Falmouth Road, and all the directors and admin staff lived nearby. That is, except for the Trevithicks. They stayed in Hale. In the days when communication was difficult, H.T.P gathered a number of branches in Cornwall and Devon. They were probably intended to add to its profits, but they were seldom mentioned. To connect these branches and to make deliveries, H.T.P developed a fleet of steam vehicles. The company became associated with self-propelled transport, and this led to the creation of a garage in Sam Polkinghorne's former premises in Truro. In 1934, H.T.P formed a joint company with Mumford Brothers of Plymouth, known as H.T.P Motors. Milling wasn't going well, Luggan's had been closed, and Valetort Mill was suffering from national competition. Henry Hosken's son, Frank, who was in charge of the Valetort Mill, negotiated a deal with Spillers to buy it together with the company's name of H.T.P. Frank and Spillers traded on so smoothly as H.T.P that most of the customers and many of the staff were unaware of the change of ownership. The remaining slimmer giant continued as an agricultural merchant under the name of Farm Industries. Then, in 1939, Mumfords bought the assets of H.T.P Motors. This left the company without any milling or motoring interests and without its original name. This may sound disastrous, but Devon Woolcombers and the numerous branches were making money. More importantly, Farm Industries was still friendly with its Cornish customers, and it continued to turn over millions of pounds each year. I must mention the fine H.T.P mill in Malpas Road, Truro. After being built in 1911, it almost disappeared from the company's books. No records of its output appear in the annual figures. Spillers didn't buy it, and it remained derelict until its recent transformation. I haven't talked about all the lively annual meetings. It's where the shareholders shouted abuse and unseated the cantankerous old Richard Trevithick as its chairman. Throughout its lifetime, the company continued to borrow money, which it seldom repaid. As well as a lot of local family history, the book contains a suspected murder and a number of things that could only happen in a Cornish conglomerate. For all its ups and downs, H.T.P served the people of Cornwall well. Its directors and staff were proud of what they did, and Cornwall benefited in many, many ways. If you'd like to read the interesting reviews of this book, and possibly buy it with free postage, visit the website at www.htpbook.co.uk. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.